Awesome. I think we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the panel on investing in NFTs. I'm joined by some awesome colleagues in the space and really excited to kind of kick it off, give you a lens. We have, Andrew Kiguel, who is the CEO of Tokens.com, Nisa, Amoils, and Julian So. I think before I kick things off and get everyone to give a brief introduction, I would love to just paint a picture of the landscape coming into the conversation today. We've seen a lot of press and articles really around the metrics in the NFT space, indicating that interest has been subsiding in both non-fungible tokens and the metaverse. Although we have seen recently the single largest sale day through Yuga Labs and the other D drop, which is something I'm excited to dive into with the panelists here and get their perspective. But despite having actually seen the market interest in NFTs peak really in Q4, some of the metrics do tell a different story. Although the amount of sales has gone down from Q4 to Q1, the average volume, the average size of NFT transactions has continued to rise. It's actually up about 80% in the price of NFTs sold quarter over quarter. And since the retail interest has subsided, we did see search history peak back in June. There's still a lot happening behind the scenes in this ecosystem, and I think that with the guests here, we'll be able to really take a different perspective and lens from a VC approach, from a private equity approach, and an investment approach, and really give you guys some insights on tools on where we see the market heading. So before we jump in a little further, why don't we kick it off? Andrew, it'd be great if you could give a brief introduction to the audience.
Sure. Thanks, Zach. I'm Andrew Kiguel. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tokens.com. Tokens.com is a Web3 investment company with several verticals. We have staking, we have play-to-earn gaming that we invest in, and as well, we are the largest owner of Metaverse Group, which is a full-service Metaverse real estate company that does everything from land leases, brokerage, design, software programming, all types of things related to providing enterprises frictionless entry into the metaverse.
Awesome. Julian?
Yeah, hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Julian So. I'm the Group CEO of XBE.com. XBE is actually a group of technology companies that is applying and implementing and adopting a lot of blockchain and NFT technologies. Under our group, we have two companies that are currently listed on the OTC markets in the US. Collectibles that is actually specifically exploiting or implementing NFT technologies for arts and collectibles industry. And then Marvian would be the company that actually is implementing NFT technology for the media and entertainment industry. And apart from that, of course, we have quite a number of other technology companies that are still in the process of incubation, and we hope to take them to listing hopefully in the near future. Thank you.
Awesome. Nisa?
Thanks, Zach. Hi, everybody. Nisa Amoils. I run a venture fund called A100X that invests in companies early stage. We've seeded companies like Dapper Labs, Mythical Games, and we are very bullish on this metaverse infrastructure and tooling. And I also host a show at NFT NYC, upcoming conference, all about NFTs in the metaverse.
Fantastic. And for myself, I'm Zach Friedman. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of GDA Capital and the Chief Strategy Officer of Secure Digital Markets. Across the portfolio, we've helped incubate a number of ventures in the metaverse space. Metaverse Group, which is a vertically integrated real estate venture. NFT Basel, which is the world's first luxury NFT marketplace, as well as we've deployed capital across over 25 different businesses that are native to the Web3 space, and strong advocate for the Web3 movement and the ongoing adoption. So when I first started off, I painted a little picture of the current market landscape. As I mentioned, we saw in the previous week, even the Wall Street Journal come out with an article that NFT sales are flatlining. But the metrics do tell a bit of a different story, and with the participants here, I think that we have a different perception and lens. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. I think it's obvious the market is evolving, but there's still plenty of opportunity. Nisa, why don't you start? I'd love to hear your perspective on the current market landscape with respect to the three ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that Wall Street Journal article too and dug in a little bit on the data behind it. And I think they had some incorrect data they were quoting there. I think if you look at Dune Analytics or Nansen, you'll see that actually there was growth in the market. And, there continue to be variations on the use cases of NFTs, rather than just the JPEG storyline. You're seeing much more them used as primitives for real estate, music, sports, fashion, all these different areas that really I'm seeing an explosion in the startup ecosystem for all these types of use cases as the metaverse, quote unquote, starts to fill out. And I think that article was very misleading, actually, for what's going on in the industry. So remain very bullish and optimistic.
Right. And I think it was a very brief article. I happened to have been quoted, but was unsure on what the article would come out saying. But having looked at the analytics, I tend to agree. There has been less NFT sales and less overall volume. But to my aforementioned point, the transaction volume, the transaction size of each relative NFT has continued to pick up. And yeah, it's interesting. The analytics always do share more insight. Andrew, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. There certainly has been what I would say the shine has come off since some of the peak highs in Q4 last year. And many people like to attach NFT technology to specific, what I would call more speculative assets, JPEGs, even things that I love like CryptoPunks and Bored Apes are assets that are built on NFT technology. But what I think many people are still missing, and especially the media loves to miss this point, is that NFT technology is one of the most important consumer technologies that's around. This is going to impact so many different things. And when you start to sort of just peg this as, just sort of, JPEG collectibles, you're really missing the entire potential here. And, this is the ability to attach a digital signature, a unique digital signature to anything that can live digitally is very important technology. And you can see the various use cases extending out to things like gaming, the metaverse. It can start extending to attaching digital assets or physical assets to it. The potential is still there, despite there being a market pullback. And we saw this, a year ago. Every couple of years, we're going to see this type of a pullback, and people panic and think the technology is dead. It's not. This is going to continue being a very important part of how the internet is used.
Awesome. Julian, what are your current thoughts on the landscape?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I'm going to have to agree with both Nisa as well as Andrew. I mean, right now, I think if you look at the current landscape, everyone is treating the NFT as if it was an end product, right? And the end product is art. And to be honest, I think if you take a careful look at the NFT itself, there are even questions and a lot of doubts about whether or not the NFT does represent the art piece. Where we stand today is, as Andrew mentioned, that NFT technology itself is really just a tool. That's how we treat it. It's not a product as far as we're concerned. But what we do is that we use the NFT to create digital ownership tokens over assets, whether tangible or intangible. So as far as we're concerned, whenever someone buys an NFT from us, we make sure that it actually contains legally binding documentation which expresses or represents ownership in some kind of asset, whether it's tangible or intangible. So interestingly, Nisa mentioned that she's actually a lawyer by training, but I've been a lawyer for more than 10 years. I've also been an investment banker for more than 10 years. I've seen the way, a lot of new products and new technology come into the space. They go into a bubble, they burst, and then the ones that are left remaining are the ones that are actually properly implementing and applying those technologies to real world situations for real world businesses. And I think that's what we're really, really focused about. And that's what I hope. That's how we're going to lead the entire conversation. And hopefully, as we grow, we're going to start to see a lot more interesting implementation of the NFT technology going forward. I hope that was helpful, Zach.
Yeah, very. And I think that has been seen in most major market cycles in both traditional markets and within the crypto ecosystem, where players have come in and there's, been quickly span off derivatives, really just trying to capitalize on the trend and capture market share. But that have been pushing product to market before it's ripe and ready. And anytime that there is a slowdown or lull, I think we do see the emergence of utility-based projects that are continuing to be built across a wide array of verticals. So I'd even like to dig into that further. What type of sectors do you guys think are most exciting, and what utilities have you seen that is making projects stand out and you think will help them, live on to the next chapter?
Well, I think that the gaming sector and the metaverse sector are certainly key aspects of where there's a ton of attention. And when you go back to the history of this, the ability to play games, there's 400 million daily gamers in traditional video games that are all starting to migrate here to Web3 technology, and it's largely NFT and metaverse based. You're going to see huge movements there. You see Facebook redoing the largest rebrand in history by converting themselves to Meta, a metaverse company. That's all going to be based on NFT technology. And so, back to what all the panelists here have been saying is that sometimes I think the impact of this technology is largely overlooked. It's sort of like, the stock market crashes and no one says, oh, the stock market is dead forever. We seem to always get that phenomenon in the crypto world. You have a pullback in Bitcoin and everyone's like, oh, blockchain is over. You don't get that in a lot of other sectors. And I think it's because it's relatively new. But in the near term, for sure, I think we're going to continue going down this pathway of what I would call more novelty, speculative products, gaming, social media related. And then over the course of the next few years, you might see things like, an area that I think is largely overlooked here is, digital identity. Things that can be attached to something like an NFT and use that technology. Because if you think back, the origins of NFT technology is really from Bitcoin. The ability to not create a double spend by creating something unique that only lives on the internet. That's just evolved into NFT technology really today to use the blockchain, to use that exact same technology, but instead of for something that there's 21 million outstanding of, there's only one. That can be used in so many amazing ways that we haven't been touched.
Yeah, I agree that there, like I was saying before, there's a lot of use cases that haven't really come to prime time yet. And you're starting to see some of that with the merging of the physical and digital worlds, like companies like StepN, companies that really try and motivate certain behavior based on, rewards, et cetera. And also the ability to flex is a very human trait. And so we've all had that capability in the physical world for a long time. In the digital world, as people start to spend more and more of their time there are different ways to do that, from your clothing or, your JPEG or what, showing that you have access to certain events through ownership. Maybe it is your land based, where the proximity is to certain other things, et cetera. So I think we're going to start to see more of that coming out in the next few years.
Yeah,
Right.
Sorry.
No, go for Julian.
Yeah, no, I personally think that there's going to be a great use case for NFT technologies, especially in intellectual property. simply because it's something that's, there isn't a central registry for ownership of intellectual property. And because intellectual property in itself is very, very broad, right? You have the full intellectual property ownership, you have the licenses, you have the contractual rights. And I think there's no better opportunity than to use NFT technology to really define exactly what kind of copyright rights or trademark rights or other types of intellectual property rights that you have, and put them into the metadata of the NFT itself. And I think that would actually really change the way a lot of things in our world today is actually being treated and traded. For example, even when we talk about images, even a JPEG images like a CryptoPunk, right? Most people buy a CryptoPunk after looking at the image, but when you buy the NFT, funnily enough, you don't even get the intellectual property to the image. And I think that's a big problem. And right now, obviously, the site solution is that you create a separate document that's outside of the NFT that then tries to grant those rights. And I think it's a big problem because there's problems with where privity of contract, whether you're a party to the contract, whether it does apply to you, what kind of governing law. And to me, from my perspective, I think if we could create an NFT where all of these rights, all of these ownership rights are actually embedded into the NFT in the metadata, that would actually solve a lot of problems. And that's the purpose of the NFT anyway, is to solve provenance, is to solve authentication, is to solve verification. And I think if we could do that right, that would really make a big change, and that would actually really improve lives in our world.
Awesome. Very well said. And I definitely agree with that. I think that there are a number of real world asset classes that can drastically benefit from the incorporation of NFT technology.
Yeah. And just one thing to add to that is, if you look at the transition of other types of technology, at the forefront of the use cases of a lot of this technology, it's always things like gaming and gambling. If you look back to like the transition of payment systems and payment processing, the leaders in that space has always been gambling sites, because they're always looking for more efficient, better ways to do this stuff. And so when you're looking today at things like NFTs, yes, you're going to get that speculative aspect because that's always going to be the leaders. They're the people at the forefront. That's where there's sort of what I would call the riskier money, people trying out different things are happening before something moves mainstream. And so I think what we're seeing today is very normal in the life cycle of a technology, with sort of the various iterations up and down, that it's going to be dominated by things like, digital art and things like that before it starts becoming more about digital identity, intellectual property in these areas. So this is, exciting to me to see that it gets proven out in these types of areas first before moving mainstream.
Awesome. And I think to that point, we're the early entrants here have been, retail driven and speculator driven. I think taking a little bit of a shift towards institutions, which do make up what I anticipate to be a large part of the future adoption. What's really necessary from either a regulatory or utility perspective to bring those entrants into the market? Maybe Nisa, if you want to.
Yeah, sure. So it's very similar to, the question about DeFi and what's going to bring institutions there, and actually the whole crypto market as a whole. But the regulators haven't yet caught up to NFTs, it being a relatively newer boom, I guess, since January of 21. And we know that there is a lot of consumer confusion about what they're getting when they buy it, right? It's a certificate of authenticity, but not necessarily the copyright or the licenses, just like Julian was saying very accurately. And so I think a lot of these could be retroactively deemed to be unregistered security offerings, just like we saw in the ICO boom. And so I think until there's some more regulatory clarity on this front, the institutions are largely going to sit on the sidelines until they feel more comfortable as fiduciaries that they could enter the space.
Yeah. It's an interesting question that I would pose. I was talking to a famous athlete, sporting athlete, who was saying, can people be selling my images as NFTs without my permission? And I think the answer was like, yes, right? Because you're not essentially owning, but I'd love to hear also what the panelists think about stuff like that, because that's an area that has the potential really to get, out of control, and maybe where things should be
Well, and
regulated.
there actually have been a few lawsuits in that vein already, right? There was Quentin Tarantino and Miramax as to who has the rights to mint that NFT collection. There was, I think, was it LVMH or one of the luxury goods?
The Jane Birkin bag NFTs, right?
That's right. As to who has the rights to reproduce an image of that bag. And I'm sure there are a lot of others that we don't even, know about.
Right, and that Birkin bag, I think they said they were going to make 1,000 limited edition bags that were not endorsed or authorized by the actual brand, but they sold out really quickly.
Right.
And that goes back to flexing in the metaverse with the bag, and why it's so popular, right? And why it's sold out.
And to make the issue even more complicated with respect to your question, Andrew, as far as the rights to the photograph is concerned, it may not even be the right of the person that was photographed. It might be the right of the photographer that can take action against the breach. So I think it's a very, very complicated question.
Very complicated. For example, for example, there's like companies that own the rights to things like Elvis or Marilyn Monroe. Could somebody create NFTs around those specific items, sell them as NFTs? Are you infringing on the rights of the people that own that IP or not? And you can get into all these areas, right? So it is a complex area that I think still remains to be defined. And also, there's an ethical issue there as well that needs to be considered, right?
Completely, especially because the actual policing of these instances of breach are increasingly difficult. Specifically, even with projects that are where the founders are anonymous and they're virtually located all around the world. And I think that there's an increasing standard being placed on founders to be public facing and reveal their identity, which is just part of that natural evolution because of several bad actors. But I do think that's necessary to the long-term evolution. And Nisa, I think despite what you said regarding regulation, I think there still are some interesting applications for institutional investors to enter the market today. And I know that Andrew, for enterprises and institutions, you guys are focused on some great ways. Do you want to touch on that for a moment?
Could you just repeat that for a sec?
On just like different ways for institutions to be able to get involved in the Web3 space today.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that the solution that I tried to provide, I was a banker for a long time, like Julian, and dealt with public markets. And what I saw is that institutions and family offices have a couple of problems in accessing this. Number one, there's a very large knowledge gap. Like, they don't have the capability to go out and buy a CryptoPunk, and let alone figure out how to secure it or even report it. For us as a public entity, I think we might be the first public company in the world to own a CryptoPunk, and we're actually staking it. We own a whole bunch of other crypto, and as a public entity, we trade OTC in the US as well as in Canada and in Europe. What we're doing is we're providing an ability for institutions, mutual fund institutions, to have ownership and exposure to these assets. So some of our largest shareholders are Canada's largest technology funds who say, we love having you as a way of getting that exposure because we don't have the capability or the mandate to do this ourselves. And so I think those avenues are becoming more available in the same way that Canada really broke ground by having the first Bitcoin ETFs in the world. I think, if I was to forecast in a few years, you might have NFT ETFs, you might have all kinds of, metaverse real estate ETFs, all kinds of things out there that can track the performance of these things.
Right. And I think that's a great point, being able to bridge that gap by offering vehicles for, these institutions to get exposure and access to the space through, more native participants that really understand the landscape and demographic and can manage various business models is fantastic. There's really the the vehicles such as what you have with tokens.com, which is unique and exciting. And then there's also, of course, the VC lens. And I know, Nisa, for example, you're sitting from a VC lens. I'd love for you to discuss a little bit about, your thesis for deploying into the space.
Yeah, and I should have clarified that I was talking about U.S. regulators, not Canadian, which are way ahead of U.S. regulators in terms of what they're allowing, which is great. So another way for people to get exposure to the asset class is through a venture fund. And we take the belief that a lot of investing in NFTs is like investing in luxury goods or fad type, what is the latest, hottest game or item, et cetera, which really don't want to be in the business of doing. It's more about investing in the underlying infrastructure and tooling behind what is enabling the ecosystem that you really get exposure to. So almost like a picks and shovels approach. And that has worked out for us as well. And, so far, the two companies that I mentioned are worth multi-billions at this point in only a short time, few years. And we're continually monitoring the iterations in, for example, play to earn, or in the expanded use cases around NFTs.
Awesome. And I think investing into infrastructure is always a great way to capitalize on the long-term growth of the space. Supplemental to the VC and the structured vehicle angle through my brokerage, Secured Digital Markets, we're trying to kind of demystify that process and provide a concierge service, for these institutions to get into the space by offering them the ability to purchase NFTs and Metaverse land directly, and really be able to transact in a way that's comfortable and familiar to them. And we do need, enhanced, infrastructure, like the custodians, the ability to provide more liquidity, fractionalize and borrow against these NFT assets, which from my seat, we're seeing a lot of amazing groups, come in to do that. So I think, Andrew, from a different perspective, you mentioned earlier Facebook and Meta's rebrand and entering into the space. We did see, Instagram announce in the past week or so, if you managed to see that, their entrance into the NFT market and adding capabilities. What do you think large players like Instagram and Meta adopting strategies to incorporate NFTs are going to do to the the market?
It's going to help make things more mainstream. Ultimately, the generation, the younger generation thrives off of, they're already in the metaverse. They're playing things like Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite, and that's going to evolve to more adult-based metaverses. The key question, with respect to Meta or Facebook through their rebrand is what's it going to look like once they're complete? Are they going to focus on something that's Web3 based, where you can buy real estate in those lands, or is it going to look more like a Roblox where they still control everything? The rumors indicate they're moving more towards a Web3 type interface and integrating things like NFTs and what I would call Web3 platforms into things like Instagram are only going to increase the popularity of these assets and make them more available to a generation that's up and coming that's already very comfortable with these areas. When you speak to the older generation, they have a very hard time believing that anything that doesn't have a physical presence has any value. They don't believe things that exist digitally have any value, whereas the younger generation doesn't have any problem with that concept. And I think in not having a problem with that concept, when you can start integrating things in with Instagram, where instead of showing a picture of your vacation or your food, you can show and flex with a picture of your CryptoPunk or another NFT that you've purchased and use it as your profile picture, or even just as a shot of something that you just bought. Zach, I think I've seen you do that on Instagram once in a while. I think that is enhances the experience and the acceptability of this technology.
Awesome. Julian, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree with what Andrew just said. I think having a lot of these mainstream social media adopt NFTs and allowing its users to display them would just gradually bring NFTs back into the mainstream, and I think that's a very, very good thing for us, for all of us, and I hope that would continue to happen.
I mean, and sorry to interrupt, how many users does Instagram have? They must have at least 1 billion users around the world, right? And, Facebook, I think, has like 3 billion and it's part of Facebook. You think about the size of that audience and despite the disdain and a lot of people really dislike Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, but I think that they're astute here in recognizing that that initial Facebook platform of I feel happy today and let me post a picture of my trip isn't working anymore. All the things that they've tried to do haven't been able to recapture or engage the audience at the same rate that all of these new technologies are going. And so really that's a dying model that has to integrate these things in, or they're going to lose those users. And I suspect out of those users, like, Facebook's got 3.2 billion users. I'm on Facebook, but I doubt I've been on Facebook in 6 months, right? It's just not something I use, even though I have something registered there. But down the road, if they integrate in things like the ability to trade NFTs, Metaverse, and all these things, that might recapture my attention and take my attention away from things like Decentraland or Axie Infinity or other things that I engage in.
Right, and we've really seen like some of the largest internet games of all time, did originate within like a Facebook-centered ecosystem. So seeing what they're going to be able to produce for those users is definitely exciting to watch. Similarly with the recent purchase of Twitter, I'm excited to see what monetization streams, if any, incorporate digital assets and NFTs into the roadmap. So that mainstream adoption is definitely upon us from that lens, and really the largest gaming companies in the world are starting to devote a lot of developers, time, resources, and energy towards building out these applications. Web3, more metaverse focused in the gaming category, that are just going to enhance adoption and get people familiar with the concept and enhance what's already being built. Julian, I'd love for you to comment, considering your portfolio, you guys look even outside of just the direct, NFT ecosystem into actual, I believe under Marvel, you guys are producing physical screens. What role do you think that some of like haptics and real world devices have in adoption?
Yeah, look, as you mentioned, Zach, I think we are also in the business of auto-stereoscopic 3D panels, and we did that quite a number of years back when 3D was all the rage. Everyone was watching, a lot of 3D movies using 3D glasses, obviously, and we obviously thought that if we could move people away from 3D glasses and allow them to actually watch 3D using without glasses, that would be a huge breakthrough. But unfortunately, the technology wasn't quite there. Even with 4K panels today, when you do 3D autostereoscopic, a lot of the images still do not come through as well as we would like it to. And therefore, right now, a lot of our 3D panels are really used for advertising and for marketing more than for movies, because you couldn't sit through a 3-hour movie with that. But obviously, the technology is growing and it's improving. We believe that once we get to 8K, that would completely change the way people look at autostereoscopic 3D images. But today, interestingly enough, even though 3D movies is no longer the hype until obviously Avatar 2 comes on, we found that a lot of people that are in the business of NFTs are now suddenly very interested to use our panels to display a lot of the NFTs that they've bought. And that has been quite a quite an encouraging feedback that we've been getting, and we are actually right now as we speak deploying a lot of these panels in a lot of different galleries in order for them to actually display the NFTs. So back to the answer, the short answer to your question is I think all of these hardware that can be used to enhance the experience with NFTs will definitely be something that will be growing in the near future. The only question is, who would be the right people to be investing their resources and their time to try and build these equipment. And just a side note, I think about a couple of months back, I saw Razer putting up an advertisement, showing a suit, the kind that we were watching on Ready Player One. And I think that's very interesting. I don't think they actually have it out yet. I think it was more an advertising campaign. But if someone like Razer were to produce something like that, I think it will make the gaming users go crazy, and that would be really interesting.
Right. I think the sci-fi geek in me is really excited to see the evolution of the world where that hardware plus haptics experience really gets to immerse with the metaverse and the intersection. And then, the flow through with interoperability to the real world. It's, I'm excited that I believe that in my lifetime, I'll really get to see what could be a Ready Player One type experience. So, that's why I'm continuing to invest in the technology and stay active in the space where, the demographic switch is that, people are spending an increasing amount of time in a digitally immersed environment. What used to be in the early 2000s about 10 to 20% of their time, today's roughly 50% of an average individual in the US's time is spent in a digitally immersed environment, meaning cell phone, internet, TV, IoT device. What's that going to look like? That trend is going up year over year. We're just going to continue to really learn, explore, experience, and socialize in an immersive environment. So it's quite the interesting time to be alive, if I do say so myself. To take another little shift, just going by the audience questions, as we have 5 minutes here. There's a few people that were interested in how NFTs are going to be used in disrupt new markets and specifically that of real estate. I would love maybe Andrew if you could provide some insight onto your thoughts there.
Sure. So I don't see it as disrupting physical real estate. What I think that NFT metaverse real estate will disrupt is social media advertising, social media platforms, gaming, areas like that. We call it metaverse real estate because it's a digital representation of what a city would look like in physical things. But ultimately, I don't see it as necessarily a disruption for physical real estate, although there is a very strong case to be made that this is the next iteration of online shopping. Now, I was talking to somebody today that, things like commercial real estate, retail shopping, malls, all these things were starting to shut down even before COVID. There's already been a massive move to online shopping. My big question has been, what's Amazon's move going to be? At what point does Amazon replace their two-dimensional pictures and reviews with something that takes place in a metaverse? And I think it's inevitable that they'll do that. And so what I think that it's going to really displace is not necessarily physical real estate, which has been on a decline for many years, but it's going to displace the way online shopping and advertising is done today. And that's the area to keep an eye out on, because it's not just quite yet about how much money you're going to make, but how can you engage and interact with that consumer in a more immersive way?
Awesome. Nisa or Julian, do you guys have thoughts on the real estate applications as well?
I agree with that. I think there might be a use case in physical real estate similar to security tokens and how you can have a token representation of a liquid physical asset. And that could be also represented with an NFT. I think it's really interesting, the distinction between buying land in the real world and buying land in the metaverse. In the real world, you have reasons for the price of land, like proximity to certain things, or square footage, or other parameters that really you don't have in the metaverse, right? There's not sort of this limited supply in the metaverse. So then how do you price real estate in the metaverse? I think the jury's out, right? Like, we're seeing a lot of hype and a lot of money being spent on land grabs there, but is it justified, right? Based on those lack of physical world parameters.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think there is an opportunity for NFTs to be applied to physical real estate. As Nisa mentioned, obviously through security tokens, that's one way. I used to do securitization. Technically speaking, you could use tokens to securitize real estate or real estate funds. But in addition to that, the point I wanted to make was this. When it comes to real estate in countries where there is already a central registry that's being managed by the government, obviously trying to create an NFT over such physical real estate is pointless, because all you're going to do is going to end up with a conflicting ownership, one on the NFT and the other one with on the central registry, and that wouldn't work. But however, the one exception would be that in a lot of countries where they have not spent hundreds of millions of dollars to create a central land registry, then there is definitely an opportunity for NFTs to be used for physical real estate. And we've been speaking to quite a few governments that don't currently already have a central registry, and they are very interested to use existing blockchain technology out there to apply that to their central land registry. And if you could really do that, I think that would be really something that's very interesting, and that's something that's really trying to solve, again, problems that are in the real world. And that's all we are about. That's all we want to do. And I think that would be really helpful to some of these countries that are out there at the moment.
Awesome. Just with respect to timing, I don't think we have much time for another question. But you guys all brought some very awesome perspectives and continuing to pave the way, both from a leadership, investment, and vehicle standpoint in the space. So I think I really appreciate having you all. I'm sure the audience did as well. It was an awesome discussion. I think that when looking at investing into NFTs, it's not always about just buying a specific collection or collectible, or investing into a business, which might not be accessible for everyone here. I think that making an investment into Web3 and NFTs based on the directional assumption of where we're headed can come with time and education, right? I think that there's some amazing resources and tools. This is one of the most welcoming and accessible communities in the world. So, partially just directing this to some of the listeners here. But there are so many different avenues for growth and development, which people like the panelists are readily looking to fund and support the development in. So don't hesitate to be creative, dive in, and try and identify what those are. There certainly are quite a few. But yeah, just wanted to part with that, and appreciate you all tuning in today to the panel and the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.